Welcome to Nobody's Perfect, a community built to support, inspire, and empower youth and families everywhere. Our mission is to break down stigma and offer solutions to the mental health and well-being challenges we all can face. Nobody's Perfect is a podcast and a movement powered by the National Alliance on Mental Illness for Arapahoe and Douglas counties and funded by Kaiser Permanente and NAMI, Colorado. I am your host, Jason Hopkins, and today we have Maddie Coombes. Maddie is a 16-year-old junior in Colorado. She is a member of the varsity POMS team and was recently crowned Miss Colorado's Teen 2024. She is passionate about her community service initiative, Fentanyl Free Futures, and hopes to become a pediatric nurse using scholarship money from the Miss America organization. Maddie, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you join us on Nobody's Perfect today. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
So, first and foremost, I'm just curious and hope you'll share with us what led you to the path to pursue Miss Teen Colorado. How did that all begin for you?
So Miss America is a scholarship organization. So one time I was sitting in the Starbucks drive-thru with my mom after school, and we were talking about how I was planning on paying for college because I've known that I wanted to be a nurse for a really long time. But there's two girls in my family, we needed to figure out how we were going to pay for college. And so I'm scrolling on Instagram while this is happening, and I see that every single state title holder of the Miss America's Teen organization gets a full ride scholarship to the University of Alabama when they win their state title. So I told her, I was like, hey, Mom, if I win this title, I get a full ride to college and I don't have to pay for it. It's a presidential scholarship, so it totals to about $129,000.
Wow.
So that would be my full 4 years of tuition to go to nursing school. And so that's how I convinced her and my family to let me compete, and it worked out well. I mean, I was praying and hoping for a way to get to go to college, and I'm so thankful that I have this opportunity. And it's an amazing organization. It's taught me so much, but what really brought me into it was the scholarship.
Well, I love your tenacity to figure out how you're going to pursue and fulfill your dream. So it sounds like you've got some big ones. And before we get into your initiative around Fentanyl Free Futures, give us a little more background and insight into you. What wakes you up every day and inspires you to just, again, not only be Miss Teen Colorado 2024, but tell us a little more about you, Maddie.
Well, I'm 16. I'm on the POMS team at my school, and I've danced since I was 3 years old. I grew up as a competitive dancer, and then in my sophomore year, I made the switch to competitive POMS because I wanted to be involved in my school. Something that I've always loved is involvement. I've been involved in church, I've been involved in school, and I'm now involved in my community and representing teens in my state. And I always knew that I wanted to have a nonprofit. I always had an entrepreneurial side to myself. I actually won the entrepreneurship scholarship provided by Corp One at our pageant this year, and so I wanted to use that to help others. So I decided to start an organization called Fentanyl Free Futures, and we'll talk about that more. But really, I just love to help other people. I love to be involved with other people. I'm such a people person, which is why I love this job so much. It is so person-oriented, conversation-oriented, and I love it so much.
So tell us a little bit more about that job. I mean, I think people know that you have to do all of the things to become Miss Teen. What does that role actually require of you once you've been crowned now?
Well, we're encouraged, obviously, to start our social initiatives, and that has been really my favorite thing about this whole process is looking into opportunities of how I can become a nonprofit organizer and the fundraisers I can do and the people I can help and the organizations that I can work with. But we also just do appearances across our state. I actually just went to the Douglas County Rodeo, which was so fun. We got to spend the day with the rodeo queens and they showed us around. That was so fun. The good thing about this job is that we're representing every teenager across the state, and the Miss is representing every woman across the state. So I can really fit anywhere that I want to help out. It's not like a one size fits all. So I can go to the rodeo and then the next day I can be on a podcast about my CSI. And because those things are so different, I have so much outreach and I get to meet so many different types of people, and I absolutely love it.
Well, and I love that you're willing to share with us a little bit more about what that experience is like, because I think people have a lot of preconceived notions from what we see about pageants and what that role is. And there's a lot more than just being smart and pretty that goes into this. I mean, if I'm understanding you, the heart of service is kind of the foundation of it. Help me understand from your perspective, what's different than what you imagined it would be, and how have you shaped or changed the perspectives of the people in your circle of influence in this role?
Well, I didn't grow up wanting to compete in pageants. I always watched Miss America, but I never was really like, that's going to be me someday. And so getting into it just this year as a junior in high school, it has taught me so much about my future. It's taught me how to be responsible for paperwork, even. It's taught me so many things that you wouldn't think it would teach you. And so it's really been such a good experience to shape my future. I'm really thankful for it. And it's definitely changed the way that I see the world, the way that I see other people, in the way that I'm seeing how can I help these people and what can I do for these people? What can I use my crown as an amplifier for these people's voices?
I love that. And I think that your passion shines through. And just in our initial call leading up to this, just really appreciated the perspective that you bring, and really to dive into the work that you're most interested and passionate about is a fentanyl free future. Like, tell us where that began for you. Like, what was the inspiration point of recognizing that this is work that needs to be done and I'm going to use my platform to do it?
Well, I had always known that I wanted to do something with drug overdose and drug abuse for about 3 or 4 years. And there was not really a big event that made me want to be in this. It was really just something that God had put on my heart, be like, you're going to make a difference in this. And it was so random, but almost like I felt like I could do it. You know what I mean? And so once I got to high school, I started learning a lot about what fentanyl is, what drug overdoses are. We had seminars, we had talk about it because it's so prominent in high schools, especially in high schools in Douglas County. We've seen overdoses, we've seen drug abuse. And so I started researching it, and I was asking, why do fentanyl overdoses happen so much? If this is so easily preventable, why? And it really is because of a lack of education on what to do in the case of an overdose. There's some shocking statistics about how many bystanders are in an overdose and how many times people didn't know what to do in the case of an overdose and could have saved a life, but they didn't. And so it's really important to me that we start this educational side of fentanyl and a fentanyl overdose so that we can lower the overdose rates completely.
Well, I love that. And I'm so glad that we have you here to educate us today from this youth perspective of really recognizing that this is happening. Not enough is being done. We have to create awareness about it. And really, it starts with your point, that education around, some really alarming statistics around fentanyl use and overdose and the lives that it's claiming, unfortunately. What can you tell us about the statistics that help underscore the importance of having this as your platform?
Well, I don't think that people realize just how common and just how deadly that fentanyl is. Something that shocked me when I was researching for Miss Colorado's Teen, because I was preparing to be asked about my CSI in my interview, I found that in 2023, 425.6 kilograms of fentanyl were seized in Colorado alone. And you think that's a lot of fentanyl, right? But you don't think that that's enough fentanyl to kill 212.5 million people.
Wow.
Just Colorado. That's in Colorado alone. So if we put that on a national scale, I'm going to compete at Miss America. If we put that on a national scale in the big states like California and Texas, how many people are going to be killed by this fentanyl is really the huge scale of it. So people don't realize the extent to which the danger is. Another one that is crazy in teenagers specifically, because I'm 16 years old and I work a lot with students and in teens, is that 84% of teen overdoses involve fentanyl. So 84% of when people overdose, it's fentanyl, and people need to know how to spot that and what to do in the case of a fentanyl overdose because it's so prominent. And one last one that I'll give you is that 67% of overdose deaths had a bystander that could have intervened, but they didn't know how to, and so somebody died. And that's more than half. So that's why the education side of fentanyl overdose is so important, so that we can be saving lives.
Right. So really anybody that's listening, just to be informed whether drugs are something that are part of your life or not, you may know somebody that's in a situation that you can save their life just from being educated around what they're struggling with. What? I guess the thing, I'm not shocked by these statistics, but I am shocked when you just put them in the sheer magnitude of just what's happening in Colorado alone. I know when we talked in preparation for this, you shared with me about the access of fentanyl and how people are inadvertently getting exposed to fentanyl without even realizing it. Help us understand, like, how is that happening? Because not everybody's just going out and saying, oh, I'm going to take fentanyl. Like, that's not how this happens.
So there's actually counterfeit pills that are laced with fentanyl. That's the most common fentanyl overdose. And I don't remember the specific number, but there's a statistic. It's in the 70% of overdoses. The person taking the drug did not know they were taking fentanyl. They thought they were taking something completely different. And so it's in Xanaxes, it's in Adderalls, it's in counterfeit drugs that contain fentanyl, because in the right dosage, fentanyl is an addictive drug. It's not deadly. So people that are dealing drugs, which this is a hard thing to talk about, but people that are dealing drugs will put fentanyl in their drugs in the right quantity to make their drugs more addictive so that they can charge more and make more money. It's really a business decision, if you would say. And so when those quantities are too high, or you take multiple of those drugs, that's when a fentanyl overdose happens. And the lethal dose of fentanyl is the size of a tip of a pencil. So that's how easy it is to overdose. So you'll be at a party and see Xanax or an Adderall or a party drug, and you don't think that's laced with fentanyl. You think that's out of a prescription bottle. But really, it's not. They're counterfeit because they're easy to get, and that's why fentanyl overdoses happen so commonly.
Well, and just to think about where so many people, especially young people, are accessing drugs from, aside from they may be getting them in the medicine cabinet at home, which might be the prescribed dose that a parent or a loved one or caregiver got, they're getting them from these nefarious sources that really may not have your best interest at heart. And it sounds like that's really the real danger in just assuming that something is safe and it's not.
Yes, and that's why education on test strips are so important, because not very many teenagers know how to test a pill. But if you're going to take it, you have to test it, because if you're going to take a Xanax, you have to test that Xanax for fentanyl. And if it has none, then go ahead and take it. But if it does, then you just saved your life. And that's why also Narcan training is so important, and what to do in the case of an overdose, how to spot an overdose is so important.
Well, I agree. And education is such a foundational approach that you're taking here about educating people about this. Aside from educating them and us about how big the problem is, like, how do you really plan to infiltrate this into, schools and youth and communities to really better understand the importance of taking this really seriously?
Well, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to work with you. I'm really wanting to be on those platforms that students are really listening to, because it's from student to student here. It's not a mom, it's not a teacher coming in and telling you don't do drugs. I'm a student, I'm in high school, I know what happens, but I'm telling you, if you are going to do drugs, do them safely and know what to do in the case of an overdose, be able to save a life. And I want to work with the school boards this year. I'm already talking to my school principal on the Douglas County School Board, the Jefferson County School Board, all those different school boards, to trying to get into schools this year. My goal is to visit 20 schools and talk to their entire student body about fentanyl prevention, fentanyl education, and I have a goal of providing 10 schools with Narcan completely free for their entire student body.
I love that. And I have no doubt you're going to achieve your goals just out of your sheer tenacity alone. But aside from that, help us understand. So you mentioned fentanyl strips, you mentioned Narcan. Let's dive into a little bit more about what both of those things are and what they do, and why it's so important that people start integrating this language into and their awareness of what's going on in our community.
So fentanyl strips are these little strips. They're very, very cheap, and you can get them, which is why I'm more focused on providing Narcan, because it's less accessible. But fentanyl strips are actually very accessible. You can get them at Walgreens, you can get them at Target. And before you take a pill, if you have any doubts that this pill is counterfeit, you should always test a pill before you take it. You use a test strip to test if this has a lethal dose of fentanyl in it. And it's 5 minutes, takes 1 second. You need a little bit of water. That's it. And that is going to save your life. Honestly, there's been so many times I've even heard stories of people say, well, I used a test strip and it saved my life. So those are really important on educating how to use those, why to use them, and just to get people in the habit of using them. And Narcan is an opioid receptor. So it's the only antidote to fentanyl, and it blocks the opioid receptors in your brain, which makes it so that you are immune to the opioid, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So if you take Narcan and you don't have any opioids in your body, Narcan will do absolutely nothing, because it only blocks the opioid receptors in your brain, which is why that we use it to undo a fentanyl overdose.
Okay, so basically, if somebody's ingested fentanyl, like knowingly or unknowingly, and they're showing signs of overdosing, you can administer Narcan and it starts to reverse those effects.
Yes, it makes it so that you can breathe again. It helps make their heart beat again. Obviously, you should still call 911. They will always have Narcan on hand.
Right.
But I'm really an advocate for keeping it in your glove box, for providing football coaches with it, for providing science teachers with it, and just handing it out to your kids, making it as accessible as possible. Because if you can spot the signs of an overdose, if somebody is in front of you and they're overdosing, you're going to start panicking yourself because you're like, don't know what to do. So if it's drilled into your brain what to do, how to use this Narcan, what are the signs of an overdose, what to do next after you use the Narcan, it is going to reduce that panic time, and it's going to reduce the time that it takes to get this person help.
I love that. And I'm grateful we have that resource. Again, being that education is such a pivotal part of what you're trying to do here, we have a lot of parents that listen to this show, and we're hopeful that we're inspiring youth and parents to have conversations around this. What are the conversations that should be happening around our kitchen table with our teens? I think you've been open about the fact that none of us should be immune to the conversation that these things are going to happen, whether we're talking about them or not. But since you're being open about this and we're having this conversation and this is the platform that you want to serve from, what are the conversations? What do parents need to know? What do youth need to know about talking to their parents about things that they're going through?
I'd say from the parent standpoint, understanding is the best thing that you can do, and say, you know what, I'm telling you, don't do drugs, but I understand that things happen, and I would rather find out that you took a pill than finding out that my kid overdosed. And it's a hard thing to say, but it really is. You would way rather find out that your kid went to a party and took a pill than finding out that you don't have a child anymore. And so sitting your kids down and saying, this is the steps of what to do in the case of an overdose. I bought you Narcan. Keep it in your glove box. Keep it in your backpack. If you're going to a party, keep it on you. Don't take things without testing them. Don't take things, period. But there are things that happen, and there's obviously things that slip through the cracks. Something that really hit me hard is Adderall is a ADHD drug. And Adderall is one of the most counterfeit drugs that contain fentanyl. And I have ADHD myself, and I don't take Adderall, but I understand how frustrating it can be when you're trying to learn. And so I heard a story about a kid who was taking Adderall to study, and it ended up being laced with fentanyl. So he wasn't even at a party. He was trying to learn. But this Adderall that he had was counterfeit, and it ended up being laced. And so it's even those types of conversations, no matter what pill it is, no matter what circumstance you're in, test it and have Narcan on hand, know the signs of an overdose, and get your pills from legit sources.
Well, so I think it's really, like, to your point, it's being empowered with the right information to understand that this is something that is dangerous, that even with the best intentions can impact or affect anybody just taking a pill. But you're not really certain of where it came from. And it sounds like, again, not to put this on youth that are taking random pills, but I mean, there is an element of having your own back and supporting yourself before you just do something that may have some incredibly dire consequences.
Exactly. It's really, test strips are really important is all that I will say. It's if you are making the decision to go take something at a party, to take something to study, to take something to sleep, make sure that you're educated on what can happen and that you're equipped for what can happen.
I love that. And you talk about making the accessibility of test strips and Narcan specifically more available. In a perfect world, how would you see that the system or the community could support that to really kind of pull this thread through, to recognize that this is an epidemic that we're facing, and we need to empower people with more tools and resources should they find themselves in a situation that requires assistance?
Colorado is actually working towards being on the solution side of distributing Narcan. The Colorado Springs Police Department recently started distributing it to areas that they see a spike in overdoses. Okay. And while that's super important because that's where the spike of overdoses are, they're disregarding the Douglas County schools and the Jefferson County schools because we don't see spikes of overdoses in those communities. And so it's really important to me that no matter who's living in this community, no matter how many overdoses are happening, that Narcan should still be accessible, because it is important to distribute it to the people that may need it the most. But everybody deserves a life-saving antidote.
Right. Well, and to recognize that, a 911 call, while our responders are incredibly responsive, it may
For
be
sure.
too late if something's
Oh, yeah.
happening and you don't have a plan B. Like, I just think it sounds like a wise prevention effort that you're really approaching this from. I want to talk about this because I know this is your community initiative for Miss Teen Colorado, but you obviously now have a platform. You now have an audience. What presence does social media play in your awareness of um, a fentanyl free future?
Well, social media is easily accessible education. I've always said it. I'm trained in social media marketing, actually. And so when I started my CSI, I knew that that was a tool that I wanted to use. So I started a campaign called Fentanyl Free Fridays. And I don't post every Friday, but most Fridays I try to post just a quick, to the point, straight fact and education about fentanyl. So I've posted about why Narcan's important. I posted about how to spot the signs of an overdose and why fentanyl is so common, how fentanyl overdoses happen, all those different things. That it's just, if I were to sit you down, I had 30 seconds to tell you all the dangers of fentanyl. Those are the things that I would tell you because it's quick and easily accessible to anybody.
I love that. And I think that approach and recognizing that our attention span seems to be getting shorter and shorter is really so important in those bite-sized clips that you can share. You mentioned something a second ago that I think is really important information, and I'd love to give you the opportunity to answer the question. What are the signs of an overdose? Like, if somebody's at a party or in community and recognizes these things, like, what are we looking for?
So you're looking for, I use the acronym BLUE. And so B is for breathing. It's for, is this person breathing?
Okay.
L is for lips. Are their lips blue? U is for, are they okay? It's for you, like you. It's for, are they showing signs of distress? Can they feel? Can they touch things? All of those different things that you would say that person's in distress. And E is for eyes. Are their pupils dilated? And so I use that acronym. That's what I share with people to say, this is the signs of an overdose.
That's powerful and simple to remember. Blue for any of those of us that are questioning that. So I guess if you're in an experience, like, talk me experientially through this. If you're in an experience and that you've done this assessment of somebody and you've decided that they're overdosing, like, when is the appropriate time to administer Narcan? I mean, if they're still responsive, do you do that at that point, or does it normally happen when somebody's more unresponsive?
Well, the first thing that you want to do is call 911. That will always be the first thing that you want to do. And then if you are, even if you're not sure that this person is overdosing, because Narcan only blocks the opioid receptors in your brain, distributing Narcan will never cause harm. So it's always a good idea to distribute Narcan if you think this person might be overdosing, because you're better to be safe than sorry. And then you want to put this person in the rescue position, which is laying on their side, making sure that they're not choking on anything so that we're able to keep that airway as much as we can. And then really you just wait for that person. You can administer CPR, but try not to do mouth-to-mouth CPR because we don't know what is on that person's lips, if there's traces of fentanyl, but you can administer CPR if they don't have a heartbeat, and wait for emergency personnel.
That's really great. And those are some helpful tips. I'm so glad that we have you using your platform to really share this incredibly necessary and important information with us because, as you mentioned, where we started this conversation, that this really is something that should be given a lot more attention. I mean, I would say it's a crisis in our communities, especially among teens. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. It's one of the leading deaths of teens right now, and it is so easily preventable, which is such a hard thing because it's so easy to prevent. So why are we letting us lose so many teenagers? Why are we losing so many young adults to this when if we could just talk about this and normalize talking about it, we would bring those numbers down so significantly.
So do you think in your work of just being a teen and going to school, are you seeing more conversations happening around fentanyl? I know that your work is to come in and share with schools the information that you're empowered with, but are you seeing these conversations happen more frequently?
I am. I think that it is definitely something that's becoming more relevant. When I had decided to compete, I was talking to the football coach at my school who taught my marketing class. And he said, I want you to come talk to my football team about this. And he said, we are Narcan trained. The coaches are Narcan trained, but I want my kids to be Narcan trained as well. And I want to work with you on that. And he has a daughter. He was thinking about his daughter. And I also have a friend who's just about to go to college, about to go to the University of Kansas. And she texted me, she said, my mom bought me Narcan because she heard about your CSI. And it's just things like that it's sharing so much wisdom and so much life-saving advice that it's so important.
I agree. I mean, wholeheartedly agree. You mentioned a minute ago being Narcan trained. Like, what does that mean?
So I've actually gone through this training program as well. There's plenty of different Narcan training programs that you can use, but it's really just trained on the basics of Narcan and how to use Narcan. And it's really a basic training on what to do in the steps of an overdose. So I'm just trained on what Narcan is. It's an opioid receptor blocker. How to use Narcan. It's a nasal spray or an injection. You're most commonly going to find it as a nasal spray. And you just use it as a nasal spray as you would if you had a stuffy nose. And it goes straight to your brain. And it really does save lives.
Great. So important. Does somebody need to be Narcan trained to carry that with them? I'm guessing no.
You do not. You do not. It's very helpful. I would say take the class if you can. It costed me about $40, but there's cheaper ones. There's more expensive ones. I really want to work with the parks and rec centers in offering these classes. I think that could be a really great thing to do in my year this year. But I'd say at least look up the basics of Narcan and how to use it. There's YouTube videos on it. So if you're a parent and you're going to sit down your kid, pull up a YouTube video on what Narcan is, because that's going to help them understand the best. Or if you're a teenager listening, just go look it up, because having that knowledge is going to save yours or somebody else's life.
Correct. Aside from YouTube, which has a wealth of information, are there other resources that you think are really important for people who want to get more information about this?
One that's really great is the DEA. I know that sounds sort of weird, but they are a big source of all the information that I find. I also have my own flyers. I have my own pass outs. I have my own Instagram. It's Fentanyl Free Futures. I answer my DMs all the time. I send my flyers out to teachers that want to put them in their classrooms, or the rec centers that want to put them up front. I send them all the time. And really just a credible source. I mean, all of the information on Narcan is really the same. So if you find one like Overdose Lifeline, that's how I'm Narcan certified. Anything like that, great source.
Well, and so really where I think the foundation begins is what you're doing is around this education. It's around having these conversations that are so necessary and so important, and recognizing that, you know, having this conversation could be the thing that saves somebody's lives or life. And I think that's so powerful when you talk about why should we be doing this. So I admire that you've taken this on, because, you know, again, as we've talked about, this absolutely is an epidemic that needs a lot more attention.
Yes. And I almost see it in the same way as CPR training. Like, you know, when you want to be a babysitter when you're young and you go be CPR certified, I see it in the same way. It's training to save a life. If somebody's heart stops beating, you do CPR. If somebody overdoses, you know what to do. And it's really just one thing, but you have to learn the facts to it once. You carry the flyer and some Narcan in your glove box, and you don't have to think about it again until somebody is affected by it.
Right. I think that's good information. So I know you've got this year as a platform. Fentanyl Free Futures is what you're using as your community service initiative. What's the next step? Because I know you're really focused on having a 501c3 and turning this into something that has legs to last. What's your vision?
Well, I want to have this nonprofit for preferably the rest of my life. I always wanted to have a nonprofit. It's amazing that I have the amplifier of the crown to do this, but past that, I want to become a pediatric nurse and eventually a pediatric nurse practitioner. And I think that Fentanyl Free Futures is very in my line of work. And I think saying I'm a registered nurse and I work with kids day in and day out, and I own a nonprofit called Fentanyl Free Futures is very powerful. And so I want to bring this into the hospitals I'm working in. I want to bring this into all the teenagers that I'm working with as I get older, as I go to college. And I want this to be something that is constantly developing, constantly sharing, constantly making changes.
Maddie, I love your energy and your passion for doing this work. I think you've picked such an important cause. And I'm so grateful that you came and shared with us about educating us about the problem, and then, you know, also educating us about what the solutions are. And unless I've missed something, I mean, there are some really simple solutions to addressing, you know, fentanyl overdoses that you've made very simple for us to understand. I mean, it starts with recognizing the signs of an overdose and then having the tools to empower you if you're in a situation where somebody is overdosing. Like, did I cover that?
Yeah, you did. You did great.
Okay,
Covering
good.
it definitely is a hard topic to talk about, but destigmatizing that among teens. I'm 16 and my entire half of my entire work is talking about this all of the time. And it's hard because I'm 16. Like I am not didn't go to med school. I'm not a nurse, but I am somebody who's very educated and passionate about my cause. And so sitting your kids down, even I have a book called Phoebe the Pharmacist, and that's how I talk to elementary schoolers about drug safety. It really starts at that age. And so sitting your kids down and talking about this thoroughly is never going to do harm.
I agree. And I think what's so powerful is the fact that you are 16 and that you've made this such a passion project for yourself and really done it from this heart of service and really wanting to save lives and create healthier outcomes. Like, I think you're the perfect person to be sharing this message. So thank you for doing that. I guess my last question is, as we're wrapping up here, how is this received in conversation among your peer group? How are your friends taking these conversations when you have them with them?
Honestly, I'm surrounded by such a good group of people. They have been nothing but supportive and they all follow it on Instagram and they all reshare the posts. And it's been great to talk to my principal about it and my dean of students and my teachers. And they all think that it's such a good cause. We even do an anti-drug week at my school.
Good.
And so I'm being involved in that. It's really when you surround yourself with the right group of people, they're going to be supportive about what you're passionate about, no matter what it is. And I'm blessed to have those people in my life. But even if you don't, just keep up with it because you will find those people when you put your time and devotion into those type of things.
Well, I love your passion and inspiration, and I'm so grateful that you came to share with us today. One question I always ask my guests before we end is, what does nobody's perfect mean to you?
I am definitely not a perfect person. You see my room behind me right now. It's bad. But I think that really those imperfections are what makes me who I am. Like those times that I've messed up, those things that I've learned from those times that I've messed up are what made me who I am, have what gotten me to where I am. I even messed up during pageant weekend. I had interviews that I messed up and I had times that I seriously messed up and they have all gotten me to who I am today. So I really like the fact that I'm not perfect. I like the fact that that makes me who I am.
I love that. And thank you for your vulnerability and being honest about that. So before we wrap up, tell people how they can get connected to you again with the work that you're doing for Fentanyl Free Futures.
So my Instagram is Maddie J. Coombes. That's my personal. And in my bio is tagged Miss America's Teen Colorado CO. And then Fentanyl Free Futures is my Instagram, just straight Fentanyl Free Futures. And you can find me at any of those. They're all connected. And let's work towards a Fentanyl Free Future this year. I can't wait.
I love it. We're happy to support this work. Maddie, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being part of the Nobody's Perfect community dedicated to supporting, inspiring, and empowering youth and families. We hope you enjoyed today's transformative conversation. Together, we are dismantling stigma and providing solutions for mental health and well-being challenges so everyone can thrive. Join us every other week on cozy101.com/imperfect or on your favorite streaming platform to continue embracing our shared human experience. If you or somebody you know is struggling with mental health, visit nobodiesperfect.community to get immediately connected to a hub of clinically approved mental health resources and tools designed to support you wherever you find yourself on your journey. And be sure to follow the Nobody's Perfect community on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I'm your host, Jason Hopkins. It's been a pleasure having you here. Stay connected, stay inspired, and remember, nobody's perfect because perfection isn't real. Your story is. Until next time.